Hey y'all, we're back again, but I am just going to do a re-record. For some reason, when I went out of my last live stream, the video just gone. So the victim's voices video that we just listened to of Tim Ballard's personal assistant speaking out and giving her press conference is nowhere to be found. And I really want that video out there. So we are going to listen to it again. This will be a pre-recorded video that I will post after I'm done here. And hopefully it will save. I'm not sure what exactly happened to the last one, but we're just going to redo it. So let's get going. All right, welcome back. So this will be an update to our Tim Ballard series that we've been following for quite some time. Most of you are aware that civil lawsuits were filed starting in October, November, and there's been a lot of things that have happened. We haven't touched on this or done an update since before the holidays. So we've got a lot to get through. So I'm going to kind of piece it out and break through some of this stuff. This is a press conference that was just done, I think 2 days ago now at this time, in regards to criminal complaints that were filed against Tim Ballard by one of the victims. So I'm not going to really give much background. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff as we go through this press conference. The audio quality on this, I apologize in advance. You might need headphones. Their audio quality, I've got it turned up all the way it's possible on my end. So again, I apologize. It's the best we've got with this. But after this, there is still a lot more that we need to talk about that has changed. There has been a countersuit filed against this victim. There has been a lot of motions that have been filed on the civil cases. Again, just a lot of pieces here and there that we will be discussing. But this is the personal assistant of Tim Ballard who is giving this press conference. So let's waste no more time and get into it. Again, this is all under fair use. This is based on my opinion only. This is for educational and entertainment purposes. This is in regards to Tim Ballard, the self-proclaimed hero that has been made into this bigger than life character by things like the movie The Sound of Freedom and so much more. He is seen in Utah as this amazing, heroic figure, when in reality, we have found out for months and months, and actually people knew years ago what he really was. So buckle up. This is very triggering content. Again, this is victims' statements given to the press. So we will waste no more time and get into it. I will be stopping and adding commentary as we go.
Thank you for joining me today. My name is Celeste, and I am here to speak publicly about a matter of great significance. As been publicly reported, I have filed criminal reports against Tim Ballard for sexually assaulting me in Utah. Last week, I told additional courageous steps by filing criminal reports in California in 4 different cities where he also assaulted me. I stand before you not only as a survivor, but as someone who believes in the power of truth, justice, and the collective strength of survivors everywhere.
So just a little background for those of you that might not have been following this very closely. It was known that she was filing in Utah criminal complaints against Tim Ballard for allegations of sexual assault. That was previously known. But what is new that she is adding to this is she has now taken the steps to further that, and she has filed in 4 different jurisdictions in the state of California. So criminal complaints have been filed not only in Utah, but also in California in the 4 different jurisdictions.
I've chosen to come forward and speak at the press conference today for several reasons. First, I want to make it clear that these sexual assaults were violent. I have epilepsy and a pacemaker, and these violent episodes caused significant mental and physical confusion after being groomed by Ballard and programmed by powerful people of this state that Ballard's use of the couples ruse was a legitimate anti-trafficking tactic and that he knew what he was doing as the expert. One of these violent episodes resulted in his semen on my clothing. It is at the crime lab being tested. I had a leather skirt on, so that is why it was not immediately washed and was left abandoned in my closet. Despite the
So what she is stating here is that an article of clothing that she was wearing during one of the assaults has actually been sent off to a crime lab for further testing. So during one of these assaults, she was wearing a leather skirt. We don't know which jurisdiction, which town that was in. Again, 4 different cities in California, these complaints were filed in. But one of them has sent the skirt with what she alleges is Tim Ballard's fluids off for further testing.
Profound personal challenges, I feel compelled to address the ongoing denials by Tim Ballard, Operation Underground Railroad, and other individuals and entities involved. Tim Ballard and his lawyers claim that I am doing this for the money, ignoring the irony of Tim Ballard claiming someone is doing something for only money. I make the following points. Having Tim Ballard in prison does not financially benefit me. It only benefits other future victims of his sexual violence. Other women who remain silent have received millions of dollars from OUR. But who does that benefit? Only OUR, Tim Ballard, not other victims.
So we have heard that there was potential exchange of money for people being silent against Tim Ballard. However, she says that in her statement. So I'm curious if there's NDAs that have been signed, and that's why it's been so hush-hush. I have yet to see any documentation of these, what I'm assuming would be settlements, but she alleges that other people have been paid significantly for their silence, basically. So it'll be interesting to see what else comes out about that over time. Sorry, as always, we've got Keke present with us.
Not the donating public, not those that find themselves in what Ballard calls the Tim Ballard graveyard. There is so much context behind the negative narrative that Ballard and his legal team decides to paint of me. Ballard's slow grooming and manipulation tactics were done in secret, behind closed doors. The covered by then covered by confusion, loss of memory from trauma and other things. It will come out regardless how they try to humiliate me. I will not back down. I was humiliated and manipulated into defending Tim. I called JJ crazy because Tim painted her crazy to cover up his lies, to pin us against each other, to pin every woman he used against each other.
And we have seen that in previously released statements by the victims in the civil suits, that he had a tendency of allegedly stating different things to each one of the women about previous women that he had interacted with. So he had, according to their statements, told each of them something different about the previous woman that was his operator that he worked with, painting them in this light that they had fallen in love with him was one of the allegations, and that, you know, he had to get rid of them because they had started developing feelings. There's been a lot of allegations that have came out in their previous statements that some of this ties into.
She was not crazy. We are not crazy. He is now telling everyone I am crazy in hopes to get away with his crimes. It is a cycle. It is the same old story. Whatever money grab I am being accused of is false. If it were about money, I would have never joined OUR. I would have never blindly went to the spear where I didn't have a paycheck or a contract. I left my business for the mission I believed in.
So what she's referencing here, and again, this is something we've previously discussed, is that when Tim Ballard parted from OUR, when these allegations started to surface, he parted from OUR and went with the Spear Fund, which was set up for him because of the allegations that had been presented to OUR in an internal investigation and all of the things that have been going on around OUR and Tim Ballard. So when he left for the Spear Fund, she went with him, which we knew at the time that his personal assistant went with him. And in previous statements in the civil suit, it is alleged that there was a lot of promises made for compensation about salary and so on and so forth. We have detailed quite a bit of that, all of the the victim statements in previous videos that we've done on this situation as it's been unfolding. And a lot of what she's referencing here is the counterclaim that was filed by OUR against her and her husband. And we will be getting into all of that shortly also, because that is an extensive document of it. I've actually got it sitting right here in front of me and all of their claims against her.
Tim's lawyers are the ones motivated by money. They bill Tim every single time they publicly humiliate Tim's sexual assault victims. The continued denial about allegations is deeply troubling. As a survivor, I am confronted not only with the traumatic experience itself, but also with the disbelief and resistance to acknowledging the truth. By sharing my story openly, I hope to break through the walls of denial and create a space for truth and accountability. Operation Underground Railroad has displayed a lack of forthrightness in addressing these allegations. It is disheartening to witness a failure to take responsibility and a reluctance to be honest about the actions of its founder and former CEO. The company's response, or lack thereof, underscores the urgent need for transparency and accountability within its organizations. Sexual assault thrives in silence, and it is my hope that by stepping into the light, we can encourage others to do the same. I want survivors to know that they are not alone and that their voice matters. It is time to challenge the system and protect perpetrators and to demand accountability from those who perpetrate a culture of silence. Thank you.
One thing I want to add to this is a very highlighted case of why victims don't come forward, especially when it's somebody that is seen in the position of power or somebody that's wealthy. And Tim had a lot of undue influence in the state of Utah, especially. He was, like I said in opening, he was seen as this hero of sorts, and who he aligned himself with, such as Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes and Senator Mike Lee and other people in prominent positions, such as the late President Russell M. Ballard, who is now deceased. But he used those positions with those friends in high-ranking places to really silence any detractors. And people instantly, when the victims tried coming out and telling their stories, started to say it was a smear campaign because Tim was potentially running for Senate. They instantly tried to shut everybody down and defend Tim's honor, and the victims have been smeared over and over again. Meanwhile, one by one, we've seen them all: Glenn Beck, Sean Reyes, Eric Moutsos, and so many more, Paul Hutchinson, come out and talk and say that they believe the victims. However, at first, everybody pretty much stuck up for Tim. It wasn't until people could prove that the statement that was released to Vice News that kind of kicked off all of this was actually from the Mormon church. It wasn't a false statement. It wasn't put out there for any other reason than that was the statement that they gave. Let's continue on. There's going to be a short question and answer session with the reporters that are in the room.
So, Celeste, one of the things that the attorneys have said in response is that you were voluntarily staying with Tim at this time up until you filed the lawsuit, just before you filed the lawsuit. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, I wasn't voluntarily staying with him. I mean, I don't know. I was supposed to be, I was working. I just wasn't getting paid. I was going to get paid eventually, but the paycheck wasn't coming. But I trusted it would coming. It just didn't come.
And what they're referencing by that is when she left OUR and went with Tim to the Spear Fund. So again, she left with Tim to the Spear Fund under the promise that she would be paid, she would have a salary, there would be compensation, so on and so forth. But the attorneys representing OUR are stating that she voluntarily left with Tim. So they're trying to diminish her story by once again stating things of that nature.
But I think the point is that if you were being assaulted, why did you keep going back?
Robert, I think she addressed that in her statement where she said that she was told that this was part of the couple's ruse, and that this was a way to infiltrate these alleged sex rings. And so it wasn't until the light bulb went off that this was all a fraud, and that's when she immediately left.
Tim Ballard's, the way the couple's ruse, he tells the public, is very different than how he has it in different countries behind closed doors in the name of saving children, when he is in his operations that you think you are saving kids, but when you know the difference of what an assault is versus how you're supposed to be, how real training and real police do it, like it's horrifying, it's horrific. And then trauma, it blocks out. I don't know. It'll come out.
I want to add something to this because I think this is very common for victims. So victims do a lot of blaming themselves in situations such as this. How did they not recognize it? How did they stay so long? The reporters are asking questions that have been brought up in this counterclaim. And they're basically saying, that is something that's going to be asked. And people have been saying that all along. She was with Tim throughout this. She has been one of the most recent to part from Tim. She is still unraveling. Victims' reactions to being assaulted vary across the board. Some are never capable of talking about it, especially in a public light like this, when you have a man in position of power and wealth. That is a whole other ballgame. She is still working through the motions. This is very new to her. She is still coming to terms with the fact in her own mind, in my opinion, that she is a victim of Tim Ballard. She believed in the cause. She was willing to do anything to help save the children. We've heard so many of them talk about when they would question things to Tim in their statements and previous filings, that he would use things such as religious manipulation. It's God's will. We're saving children. Or President Russell M. Ballard, said it was okay. Or Janet Roussan, the psychic, gave us intel and we're going here to save children. He always had a way of bringing it back to, we're saving children by doing this. Any wrongdoing that he was ever questioned on, according to what the documents and other previously released videos state, is that he had a way of almost grooming them into believing that they couldn't ask questions. They shouldn't question anything. And unfortunately, some of them didn't. They were so involved in saving children, rescuing women and children in these trafficking situations that they were willing to do anything he stated. That's what they were there for.
Celeste, did Tim act differently in California than the way he acts in Utah from your perspective?
Which part? What time?
So, for example, I think 4 out of the 5 cases are in California, and then just the one in London. Did you notice a difference in his behavior when you were traveling, when you were in California on the road?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It depends on the place, the time, the operation. It was like, as I said in my statement, it was a very slow, manipulative grooming tactic behind closed doors. The beginning, it was like he approaches it wasn't even a couples ruse when he asked me to help with operations. It was completely different. I didn't know what the couples ruse until I was thrown into an operation in another country. And then it wasn't until later when trauma comes out. And so, yeah, he's very different. He acts different all the time.
Another thing I want to mention here, just in case people aren't aware, Tim Ballard is originally from California. However, his home state, where he is well known, is in Utah. He is well known within the Mormon church because he, up until recently, was a Mormon. He attended the LDS church. He is very well known in circles in Utah. So, in my opinion, it would not be far-fetched to see a different side of him when they were out of Utah. People in Utah know him. He's recognizable. So I would think it would be harder, in my opinion, for him to fly under the radar, so to speak, in Utah, where he's so recognizable, versus being in California. He has a level of probably comfortability because he didn't have all the eyes on him of outsiders, that possibly might recognize him, or seeing him go in and out of these massage parlors or whoever the women were that he was with in California. It's not going to be the same as it was in Utah. That is my opinion, though. But I think that is definitely, I'm sure his behavior, especially when he was out of the country. We have yet to hear from so many other people who have had interactions with him throughout all along 2013 when OUR was founded. In all sorts of different countries, there is still so much that is unknown that we don't know about.
What was it like? I imagine these interviews with police departments are long and thorough and not good things to relive. What was it like to do so many of them in such a short amount of time?
Humiliating. It was the worst thing that I'd ever had to do. And I'm a grown woman, and that is one of the things that I never ever thought that I would do. And this is another thing that I didn't know that I would do, is sit here and be here at the press conference. But it was humiliating. But it cannot stop. I mean, it has to stop. He has to stop. Ballard put me here in the public. He put me here having to be in the public before he painted the narrative. He's going to paint the narrative regardless, but I was the only couples ruse partner he made public, because during the time of the Sound of Freedom tour, he was under investigation that I didn't know about because he was painting the narrative to me. And so here I am already in the public. He put me here, and I cannot let it stand. I was not being told the truth, and so I have to tell the truth now. What he was doing was not okay.
you know what stage the investigation is at? It's cleaned up in October, I think, so that was good.
And we've been asked to not discuss or have any comment regarding ongoing investigations.
So the reporter, just so you guys know, because it's very hard to hear again, the reporter basically asked what stage of the investigation are or is going on right now. Where is the investigation with these criminal complaints that have been filed? Linden charges, which is Linden, Utah, were filed previously to the ones in California. So they asked for an update on what stage in the investigation is this at. They are opting to not comment on the criminal investigation side of things, which I think is very smart at this point in time. So again, just to reiterate, 4 different jurisdictions in California, they filed criminal complaints in against Tim Ballard for alleged sexual assault, and 1 in Linden, Utah for sexual assault.
Janet Russin did some sort of YouTube podcast video where I think, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but I think she said something to the effect of she was on some of these trips and that you all shared a suitcase, and that might be why his DNA was on your clothing. Anything you would say in response to that?
Yeah, I think that was just Tim and Janet, or Tim telling. It was just another one of them maybe just putting up the narrative for an excuse of this, but it'll come out. Never shared a suitcase. Closed.
On some of these trips.
So for just another quick reminder of who Janet Rasan is, she is the psychic medium that Tim worked hand in hand with throughout his time with OUR. That is who supposedly was having these visions and channeling the prophet Nephi, who was then giving that information to Tim, and he was going to these places that she had stated to go to rescue children. She was the psychic medium that there's so many questions yet, and we will be going over the podcast and some of the statements that she has made. She is listed in some of the previous civil complaints that have been filed in the Utah courts, and we've talked a little bit about that. She is also a big proponent of Visions of Glory, the book with Tom Harrison, and that has been mentioned in some of the documents and also some of the exhibits that have been sent in with the civil lawsuits too.
It sounds like they were like fundraising trips, or Tim was receiving some sort of award or honor. Did you think during those cases that you were still participating in the couples ruse, even when they weren't necessarily missions, so to speak? Can you kind of speak to that?
He liked to utilize his time, and so if he was getting an award anywhere or speaking event, there was recon work attached to it. So there was where they're getting intel, and so it was always attached.
When you say recon work, so even if he was accepting an award, he was also kind of doing a mission or submission.
Mm-hmm.
The submissions would usually consist of going to massage parlors and strip clubs, trying to get leads after performing various sex acts with hookers and massage parlor folks.
You talked about some physical evidence in the Linden case. Is there any physical evidence in the other 4 California cases that you know of?
At this time, I think it's best that we don't comment on any of the ongoing investigations.
Do you want to, I guess, kind of address this statement? Do you think Tim should go to jail for this?
Yes, absolutely. You can't do this to people. It's inhumane. There's so much to this. It is evil. What he has done is evil to so many people.
So if you couldn't hear what the question was, it was, do you think Tim Ballard should go to jail for what he has done? And that was her response. So again, she is not the only alleged victim of Tim Ballard's. She, however, is the first known to file criminal complaints against Tim Ballard.
In the podcast, when they had a video of you talking about the North Korea operation. I think it was actually the North Korea ring in California. But you spoke pretty positively of the experience. Do you want to address that?
And sorry, say that one.
There was a video that you recorded, I guess, talking about the couple's ruse and how it was beneficial and how it helped save kids. And they point to that as proof that, you know, that your story's changed. Do you want to?
Yeah, I didn't want to do that podcast. And if they played the whole podcast, it would look very different. There's reasons behind why I was in that podcast, and it'll come out. All of it will come out.
But sitting here today, you don't think the couple's ruse is beneficial. I think in the previous news conference, you said it didn't actually, you never saw it save any kids.
Never. It never did the opposite, complete opposite.
So she was asked if she ever saw him saving children. She said never. So, and they're also talking again about the podcast where she was on after a North Korea operation, and I can find those and bring them all and we can watch and go through them for full context too. This is typical though, and I think we all expected it. The counterclaim by OUR and what they detail, which we will follow up with and go through the entire document. It's like 40 some pages, and break down what they're claiming in regards to Celeste.
Celeste, when we interviewed Tim Ballard last year in February, you were in the room. Were you surprised at that time that Tim walked out of the interview and kind of handled it the way he did when he was questioned about some of these investigations? And how has your perspective kind of changed since then as we look back on that about a year later?
I wasn't surprised at all. Perspective has changed because I know the truth. I know the whole picture. When I first started at OUR, I didn't care about, I didn't know whatever negative things I heard, I dismissed just because OUR, I was in it for the mission. How could they do anything bad? Like, I loved the mission. And so anything negative, I didn't ever look into anything ever. I trusted them fully. And so when anybody said anything negative about OUR, I was the first one to stick up for them. When he walked out, I made sure that he was, protected, and made sure that, like.
And what she's discussing here is an interview that she had done with Adam previously, where Tim was asked a certain question. He got frustrated with the questioning, stood up, removed his mic, and walked out of the building. I have that video too that we can play and go through. I think I've shown it in previous videos too, but she was there at that time. She helped, defend him. And as she states, her role was to protect him. She was basically at his beck and call. If you go back to her statements that were released in the first civil suit, she did everything on his behalf. She really was dedicated to the fight of protecting children, in my opinion.
I don't know, just because it was the news thing. I didn't even really know what the interview was for. I was just there because he asked me to be there, and I needed to set up another interview afterwards and more of their appointments. But so I hope that answers your question.
Kira, did you have something you want to share with us?
It's difficult to honestly listen to a lot of these questions because you guys want straightforward answers. And when you're in a situation where you are completely manipulated from the very beginning, even before you meet him, because they paint this picture of something that they're doing that isn't real. And
she is another one of the complainants in the civil suit that has been filed. She was in the first press conference that was released when the victims first came forward and spoke on camera. So she is another one of the alleged victims of Tim Ballard's.
So you go into it believing something, and then you're completely manipulated, gaslighted, abused by the master himself. And when we say it's pure evil because in those moments, you cannot see things clearly because you are being told stuff over and over and over while you are being harmed emotionally, spiritually, physically. And all you can think is that you are doing this for the good of the children. And so the questions that you're asking, well, why did you keep going? Why did you do this? Because you're not in a state where you can think clearly. You're not in a place where you even believe you can. You're in those situations and doing things that are wrong because this is where you are being told that everything you're doing is for the good. This is what we have to do to save the children. And when you come out of it and you see it, and we are still doing the work to realize what actually happened to us, and it is horrific. There's no other words except for it is horrific. And the way they keep coming at us, it's wrong. And it's time for anyone involved to actually stand up. And we are doing this, and we are being faced with challenges every day. But the truth is that we stood up to him to his face. Celeste and I did. Celeste, I can only speak for what I went through and how horrific it was, but Celeste went through that tenfold, and she is here, and she stands strong for all of us, because the only thing that we want to do is to bring light to this situation and what has happened, so it doesn't happen to anyone else. Anyone else. And I just hope that it does help people have a voice, but especially to all of this, because people want to stay behind closed doors. People who have filed before this, and they want to stay quiet because why? What is that doing? That's a money grab to me. But we're here like fighting this every day publicly, and we don't have it.
Again, I find that interesting that she alludes to previous complaints that have been filed and a money grab. In her opinion, that would be a money grab. So again, making me believe that there has been some money that is exchanged hands for silence. So will we ever find out? I'm sure we know that NDAs have been signed extensively, but what are we going to learn eventually? Who got money? How many more women were there? How many complaints were filed that were settled out of courts? I am really interested to find out.
Any money from this. Like, we're not getting anything out of this except for trying to stop the evil.
And they're getting smeared in the media and all of Tim's sympathizers. He's got like the Tim Ballard little culty crew. It is ridiculous to watch them go into overdrive and protect his image. His image was built off of falsehoods to begin with. We have still yet to find out what his actual involvement with the CIA is. We've heard so many different things. His claims don't seem to be able to be sourced in any way, shape, or form. And we've heard many different answers to the question of what did you actually do? Are we ever going to learn the truth of this? But they use all of these questions to smear the victims' credibilities. The victims deserve a voice, and they are absolutely being dragged through the mud by anybody that honors Tim Ballard, because if you speak out against Tim Ballard, you've been told that you must be pro pedophilia, or it's just your political affiliations, or you're against, ending trafficking. That is not anywhere even remotely the case. What they have done by using Tim Ballard and the Sound of Freedom is push off so much misinformation that is actually harmful to trafficking victims. It is harmful to people who work in the field of trying to help end trafficking. What Tim Ballard and OUR and many other organizations who are in it for profit, in my opinion, are doing is making the work of those that are really out there in the field trying to save trafficking victims and help trafficking victims. It's making their work 10 times more. OUR is still fundraising. It doesn't make sense to me. And Sound of Freedom is still raking in all sorts of money. And it was marketed as this true heroic story of Tim Ballard, and all of his work to do good. And then we're finding out that the baseline of that wasn't factual to begin with.
And what Celeste has done for this cause is so heroic. It's something that she should be praised for. It's something that people should honor her for, because none of this is enjoyable at all. But Celeste is a hero because she's using her voice and she's not hiding behind any doors.
With all of these law enforcement agencies now investigating, do either of you have confidence in the Utah Attorney General's office and its investigation?
He asked, do either of them have confidence in the Utah Attorney General's investigation into this? Now, I will, since I did film the last one and it disappeared, I did go download some more documents and we will be getting into it. But unfortunately, it's looking like Sean Reyes might have been dismissed from the civil complaint. I have to dig into it a little bit deeper, so please bear with me, and I will be doing a follow-up on that. But as it stands right now, there's been a counterclaim that's been filed, and it potentially looks like Sean Reyes has been dismissed off of at least one of them. I don't know if he's fully been released off of all of it or how this will go. We will do a follow-up on that. So bear with me while we unfold all of this, because there's so much happening in the background with all of this. And don't let it fail you either that when all of this was going on and there was problems and people were coming forward about Tim, there was a gentleman that Tim used to help set up one of the victim's husbands, allegedly, as being behind a potential targeted assassination attempt on a Ecuadorian presidential campaign candidate. There is a lot more to this that they have done in the background, allegedly, to silence the victims and anybody speaking up on behalf of what was going on. That's a pretty hefty situation if that actually happened, that they used a gentleman, and it isn't, we've gone through it in the documents, it is in their statements of what happened. The husband gave his full statement and detailed what he experienced by speaking out against Tim Ballard. There was a lot of fear of anybody coming forward.
Might be more appropriate for the attorneys to answer that question. And I don't intend to speak for the other members of our legal team, but we don't have confidence in the Utah Attorney General's office. We've seen other situations that cause us concern. The Attorney General did meet with our clients, and he apologized for his role in this. and that was greatly appreciated. But he's got to put his life back together too, because he's done some things that are unbecoming of the Attorney General's office. And so we've been invited to have to participate in those investigations, but they're going to have to happen independent of our clients because of that history. And we know that there are other law enforcement agencies that are investigating it, and so that gives us a lot of comfort that there's other eyes on it.
When you say independent, that means that will not be interviewed by the Utah Attorney General's office.
That our clients will not be correct.
Were you both at that meeting with Sean Reyes? How would you describe, I mean, did he do most of the talking? Was he like apologizing or making excuses, or was he mostly, like, how would you describe? Was he mostly listening, or how would you?
So just a little background, if you are just catching on to this now, Sean Reyes had sat down. He had given a public statement that he believed the victims after a 45-minute discussion with the victims. And he came out, you know, in support of the victims and kind of changed his tune. Then he said he will not be running for re-election. It's been a whole sticky mess with him, in my opinion. I don't think that Sean Reyes should be still seated in office as of right now, especially as Utah Attorney General. And just a little bit more context to the situation, Sean Reyes was put into Utah Attorney General's chair in 2013. Interestingly enough, him and Tim Ballard have been best buddies. OUR started in 2013. The depths of all of these relationships and the protection that Tim had built in around him with all of these high-powered, wealthy people was extensive.
He spoke for about 45 minutes, and then we all had a turn to speak and say our truth. I can only speak for me personally, but the thing is at the end of the day, no matter what he says going forward, he believes us. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change that he didn't do his job. And I told him that. I hope he does.
Good for her. I am so proud of these women. So proud of these women. This is incredible. And I am so glad that just because he is Utah's top law enforcement officer and all of these accolades that he supposedly has, truthfully, you guys know how I feel about him. If you don't, go watch some of my videos on him and you'll find out. I am completely disgusted by the Utah Attorney General. And I lived in Utah. So this isn't somebody that just all of a sudden woke up one day. He came out in defense of Tim Ballard after these allegations surfaced. He has tried to discredit anybody that spoke up against Tim Ballard or himself. There has been stated by many people that multiple complaints had gone to his office about this situation, and he did nothing about it. So I am so thankful that they're not just taking his lip service and feeling comfort in that. There needs to be action behind his words.
Does stick to his word moving forward. But like I said, we wouldn't be in this, well, I guess I didn't say it, but we would not be in this situation if he would have done his job and followed through on all the claims that have been made before us for years and years and years and years.
She is very spot on. If they would have found or investigated years ago, because as they're stating, there was many complaints. We have yet to see how many or the extent of them or what years they started going into the Attorney General's office. But it has been stated by numerous sources that there was many complaints that had been filed with the Utah Attorney General, and nothing ever happened. We saw what they did to Utah Attorney Troy Rawlings, Davis County Attorney Troy Rawlings, and how he was attempted to be silenced in this whole situation. There's statements in one of the civil suits that has been filed about some of that. It has been maddening to watch this play out. And then one by one, the people who helped Tim get to the position he was in, that he very arrogantly, in my opinion, continued to victimize and re-victimize these victims over and over again. They did nothing to help protect the victims. They turned their back on the victims time and time again. And it was only until their reputations were put on the line and people were connecting the dots of who helped protect him all these years that they finally came out and said anything. Victims are to be believed. This is why victims have a hard time coming forward, because they're not believed. They're smeared. Nobody wants to listen. And these women are extremely brave for coming forward and taking on what they have. The connections throughout this story and what this has been has to have been a nightmare for them. And once again, their voices deserve to be heard loud and clear.
And now we're here, and I can't speak moving forward because I don't know, but none of it's going to take away what happened, and hopefully all we can do is stop it. But I'm not going to give him faith until action has happened.
45 minutes sounds like a long time.
It was a good amount of time. I mean, I can't say if I believe him or whatever, because that was my only time meeting him, and I don't just give my trust away anymore that easily. Like, it needs to be proven. And so I think he wanted to explain some things, and he did, but like I said, that doesn't change the situation we're in, and moving forward, we'll see what actually happens.
I think to just carry further what Alan said, I think the conflict of interest runs too deep. I don't think that organization can effectively screen its involvement having its supervisor not have influence. I just don't think that even the rank and file, as professional as they are.
I agree with him fully on this. I agree 100%. It needs to be an independent investigation that has nothing to do with the Attorney General or anybody underneath him. It needs to be a complete outside source that investigates the Attorney General's office, in my opinion. That's absolutely what's necessary for transparency for all of the constituents of Utah, for the victims, everything. They're owed that. It has been noted numerous times in all of these, the filings, and many other people have stated that he was well aware, and other people in the office were well aware too. He is Utah's top law enforcement officer. So it's a little hard that his influence is not going to affect other law enforcement agencies underneath him in the state of Utah.
Having been a former one, I think the issues that this case involves creates such a deep conflict of interest that I don't think that it's screenable internally. And that to me is an issue that we'll try and raise as we move forward, as we advocate on behalf of our clients. So I think if you were to sum it up, the conflict of interest is too deep. And I think that that's really the bottom line.
I will add to that at this point, our clients have put their trust in law enforcement, and we feel confident that each of the agencies that our clients have met with to file criminal reports with, that they will do an effective job of a thorough investigation and move forward with prosecution.
Again, and she is speaking distinctly to the law enforcement office in Linden, Utah, where the first criminal complaints were filed, and then to the 4 different jurisdictions in California. So they have faith that those law enforcement agencies will do a full investigation and a very thorough investigation. It's good to hear her say that. The awkward silence, everybody looking at each
Thank
other.
you so much for your interest in this important issue for our clients. We appreciate your attendance today.
And thank you for your sensitivity to the nature of your questions and their time.
And that completes the interview with the victims. Again, I just wanted to highlight once again their voices. Their voices are important and should be heard. And they are going to continue to try and do everything they can to silence the victims and any detractors of Tim Ballard's. Tim Ballard, like I said, he has this little culty following. And if you don't support him, you don't support the sound of freedom, you're instantly, you know what we've all heard that has been said. I don't even have to repeat it anymore. We've seen it so many times that it'll be in the comment section, I'm sure, after this video is put up. People have turned this into a political situation, and it's not. It's really not. This should have never gotten to this point. This should have been investigated years ago if people would have done their jobs and really stopped protecting these people and building them up to be untouchable in a way. They felt that they were untouchable. And unfortunately, there's so much we don't know. Will we ever know? I don't know. There's so many more things. There's been so many countries that they've been into that we haven't heard anything any further about. Will we ever know if any children were rescued? I still have a lot of questions about Catherine's Children Need Families organization. There's a lot of things that are very unsettling to me personally about that organization and all the kids that they supposedly brought in and rehomed. There's just so many questions that surround every single piece of this story. Sound of Freedom should be pulled off of the shelves, in my opinion. It has done nothing but harm the actual mission of people trying to end trafficking. The statistics that they continue to spread are not rational. They are not factual. They're not transparent about anything. And I hope going forward that the victims' voices continue to be heard loud and clear, and we see something positive come out of this. As for all of you, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Where do you think we're headed? We will come back and we will go over the countersuit and why some of the questions that were answered or asked today were what was asked, because this counterclaim was filed. So they kind of know what OUR is trying to paint the victims as already. That's why some of the questions were what they were. But thank you guys for watching this with me, especially if you came for round 2 after streaming live with me earlier. Again, I apologize. I don't know what happened. It just went bye-bye. Somebody texted me and they're like, I was trying to watch your video and it disappeared. I have no idea. I didn't get a strike or anything, so I have no idea what's going on with it. Maybe it'll pop up again, but until then, this will be up for you guys to watch. Let me know in the comments what you think below, and we will come back in another update soon with the counterclaim that has been filed. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I will play you out with, oh, maybe I should play the cult song on the way out. Have a great day, y'all.
Whoops, you're in a cult. Whoops, whoops, you're in a cult. Whoops, you're in a cult. Whoops, whoops, you're in a cult. Whoops, you're in a cult. Whoops, whoops, you're in a cult. Giving grandma COVID and whoops, you're in a cult.
Be careful joining those cults. You saw the faces of some of our definite cult members there. Have a great day.